Audiobook Academy. Book Summary. Fahrenheit 451. By Ray Bradbury. Ray Bradbury's dystopian novel Fahrenheit 451 was published in 1953. Book burning has been outlawed and firemen are tasked with destroying any that they come across in the future. The future is a world where information is tightly regulated. This kind of information is fed to the public in order to keep them from questioning their government. People's life are guided by television, which is in their hands. Books have been steadily phased out because they encourage critical thinking and the ability to reflect on what one has read. They were first censored, then removed from schools, and finally destroyed, depending on how controversial they were. This culminated in the destruction of all of the books. People expected this to level the playing field intellectually, but in reality, it provided a handy means of stifling dissent among the populace. Guy Montauk, the protagonist of the story, is searching for answers. He's curious about the world around him. No one has ever considered these problems, much less come up with any solutions, due to the mind-numbing routines of daily life. They don't care about anyone save the actors they see on television because they have no concern for the lives of their fellow humans. Broadcasting has evolved into a multi-screen experience that is both interactive and immersive. Guy, a fireman, is supposed to be destroying books, but after meeting a neighbor girl, he begins to rethink his activities. The world shifts when he begins to read. Almost everyone on Earth has been killed out by nuclear weapons by the end of the novel, and the world is ready to start over, presumably in a better place. We think this book is impossible until we see people sitting next to each other, not talking, but texting texts. Most homes have large flat-screen TVs, which we can watch on our phones while we're out and about. People want me to forecast the future when all I want to do is prevent it, Ray Bradbury stated in an article in 1982. Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451 begins in the future. The film takes place in a tiny town in the United States. There are a lot of things that are legal. Two of them are reading and walking. Guy Montauk is a firefighter who takes great pride in his job. He wears a helmet and a slick black uniform with a salamander insignia on his arm and a phoenix crest on his breast. The books burn in this future, not the firemen. He notices a person wandering along the road as he nears his driveway one night. He's curious because he doesn't see this every day. For the first time in his life, something new and exciting has occurred. When he stops to talk to a girl, his life is changed forever. Clarice McClellan is a 17-year-old high school student. To which he responds, "I know what you mean. Walking is one of the outer things that they do." As soon as she realizes he's a firefighter, she informs him that's what they used to do. Guy is drawn to her, despite the fact that she makes him nervous. She asks him whether he is happy before she enters her own house, which inspires him to reflect on his life for the first time. The moment Guy steps foot inside his own home, he knows that he is not content. In the middle of the night he wakes up to discover his wife Mildred asleep with her earphones on and realizes she has taken too many pills. He dials the hospital. Pump her stomach and replace some of her blood with fresh blood are sent over by two sarcastic hospital employees. Meanwhile, Guy goes outside to hear the voices and laughter coming from McClellan's house and observes what's going on. Clarice had revealed to him that her strange family does communicate. It's finally time for him to get some shut-eye after the medical staff has left the room. Mildred has no recollection of the night before the next morning. The only topic of conversation Guy has with her is what she's watching on TV. The three largest walls in the main room of their home are plastered with 3 wall-to-wall televisions. Most of the shows are participatory, allowing viewers to participate in the storyline. To help spectators get into the action at the correct time, they even send out scripts. Guy passes Clarice as she stands on her yard, catching raindrops with her tongue, on his way to work. Using a dandelion to rub on your chin may detect if you're in love or not, according to her. An irate Charisse orders her to rush to her scheduled appointment with her psychiatrist when it doesn't turn yellow on him. Because they believe she lacks social skills and is very self-reliant, the government has ordered her to visit a therapist. Guy tilts his head back after she has left and gets a raindrop on his tongue. After arriving at the station, Guy is greeted by a mechanical dog. Trying to pet it, he is met with a growl and a snap. Guy raises the issue with Captain Beatty, who expresses his concern. While he is perplexed by the dog's lack of interest in him, the captain points out that they are machines, and as such, the only thoughts they have are predetermined. The hound may have been taught to only react to Guy because he's been threatened twice. That dude with the machine and all of his antics. The guys of the precinct are kept amused by Slash Dog. That fireman committed suicide by configuring his chemical complex to attack the hound and then setting it on fire. Even though no one could have programmed the hound to react to Guy, Beatty assures Guy that the hound will be examined as a precaution just in case. Guy and Clarice converse every day after Guy gets home from work. To get his attention, she poses thought-provoking questions and explains that she doesn't attend school since it's pointless and monotonous. There is no Clarice in the morning of day 8. He contemplates looking for her, but his train pulls in and he has to get to work. Guy inquires about the man whose library they destroyed the week before at the firehouse. "It's in the lunatic asylum," says Beatty. Fortunately, he stops himself before he can mention that he had read the opening line of the fairy tale before setting fire to one of the books that he was reading. In response to a question about whether or not firefighters ever put out fires, the men bring out a rule book that says Benjamin Franklin founded the first fire department in 1790. The initial mission of the local volunteer fire department was to destroy English propaganda materials. The alarm goes off without warning. They make their way to an elderly woman's home. Her attic is full of books that she has tucked away. Guy grabs a book when he is shoved aside to get to the books. He stuffs it into his coat without even batting an eye. The books are sprayed with kerosene by the firefighters, but the woman refuses to leave. Guy tries to stop Beatty from starting the fire and tells her to leave. However, she still refuses to do so. In response to Guy's departure, she drops a match and ignites the flames herself. She perishes in the blaze. Everyone is quiet on the way back. Guy's life is growing increasingly disorienting. After returning home and putting the book away, he begins to discover that he has nothing to talk about with his wife. No one can remember when they first met, so he slips into his own bed and begins questioning her about it. Mildred has lost all interest in what's going on around her. She only cares about her television family. Guy watches as she swallows sleeping pills, wondering if she will forget to take more and wake up in the middle of the night to take more. Because he hasn't seen Clarice in 4 days, he asks her before she goes to bed if she's seen their next-door neighbors. She claims that they've since left and that she believes Clarice was killed when her car was hit by a car. Guy wakes up the next day with a sore throat. He's haunted by the death of the elderly woman from the day before. He tries to communicate with Mildred, but she is unable to understand him. So she becomes upset when he asks her if there's anything that's been bothering her lately. After that, he asks her what she would think if he were to leave his work. As the captain approaches their walkway, their quarrel will not be resolved. Captain Beatty says he expected Guy to take a sick day following yesterday's events. This issue comes up for the majority of firefighters at some point during their employment. In an attempt to make Guy comprehend why they do what they do as firefighters, he recounts their past. If Beatty's explanation had sounded less frenzied, this might have worked better. People wanted to see their stories as movies, therefore television and other media made books obsolete, according to him. It's all about getting what you want right away. Another reason he cited was that books were more repetitious and condensed because of the broad availability of literacy. It's also possible people are banning books because they find so much of what's in them unpleasant. Book burning was the next step after that. Mildred cleans the house as Beatty talks. She discovers Guy's book, which he had hidden under his pillow, and makes an attempt to bring it to light. Beatty pretends not to notice when Guy demands for her to sit down. He then goes on to give a rambling history lesson. People, he claims, were solely interested in magazines, mostly pornographic ones with the occasional comic book thrown in. It was the firemen who became the burners of books, especially those that may elevate a person above their neighbors. Everyone's degree of intelligence must be equal. It was possible for books to make people feel like they were better than others. Who knows how the McClellans managed to become so different? Guy asks Beatty. As a result of their efforts to reform the school system, Beatty tells him that the family had a large dossier on them. In addition, he remarked that Clarice's death was a wonderful thing, as it was better for her. Guy learns from Beatty that he read a few books while working as a firefighter and found them to be completely useless. As he prepares to depart, Beatty reminds Guy of the importance of their work as firefighters. When a firefighter mistakenly brings home a book, a curious onlooker inquires what will happen to it. According to Beatty, he would have between 24 and 48 hours to review the document before he was expected to burn it. They would burn it for him if he didn't. Guy informs Mildred after Beatty leaves that he has no plans to return to the fire department. Firefighter no longer excites him. His collection of roughly 20 novels is also on display for her to peruse. She attempts to burn them but is calmed down by him who wants to share them. He has been dissatisfied and believes that one of these books may hold the answer. Additionally, he hopes to discover something in them that he can share with others. He asks her to give him 48 hours to read a few of them, and she agrees. Someone or something knocks on the door as they are chatting. It wasn't until later that we realized it was a mechanical dog hunting. As Guy settles into his reading chair, he begins reading Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift. She doesn't like reading, so Guy and Mildred spend the day together reading. She wants to return to the comfort of her own home, where she can watch television. Because he is still unsatisfied with the books, Guy is looking for someone to assist him grasp them. He recalls an elderly professor sitting on a park bench, engrossed in a poetry book. When Guy first spotted the old guy, he wanted to flee, but when Guy assured him that he was secure, the man identified himself as Faber and provided Guy with his contact information. His friend Guy contacts him now and asks him how many copies of Shakespeare, Plato, and the Bible are still out there. There is no answer, and the old guy hangs up. A dawning realization occurs to Guy at this point: the Bible he stole from the woman may be the final copy to exist. There's no way to hand the book back over, but perhaps, by giving Beatty another book, he will remember which one he took and then recall that there are plenty of others at home. In order to turn it in, he decides to find someone who can create a replica of it for him, so he can. When he says he's leaving, Mildred informs him she's having a party with friends to watch TV later. Guy asks his wife whether she believes the family on television loves her back, another attempt to connect with her. Despite this, she is still unable to comprehend his reasoning. Guy tries to memorize verses from the Bible while riding the train to Faber's, but he gets sidetracked by a commercial that is playing over the speaker. As his rage grows, he begins brandishing the book and yelling at the speaker to stop talking already. Other passengers are terrified by this. Despite their best efforts, he gets off the train before they can summon the police. As soon as Guy meets up with Faber, he shows him the book, which helps to ease his concerns. To better grasp the book and the other novels he has read, Guy requests Faber's help. Guy can't figure out why other people, like his wife, appear content. According to Faber, his sadness isn't caused by literature at all. Because he knows something's missing, he can only point to that as the only tangible evidence of it. As Faber explains to him, the meaning he gets from reading books can also be found in other mediums, but people have ceased requesting it. Instead of soil, sunlight, and rain, the flowers are attempting to survive just on flowers. To avoid the terrible aspects of life, many people wish to simply watch television shows. He claims that unlike television, books allow readers to put them down and take their time to absorb the content. Guy, ever the doer, proposes that the firefighters' reputations be tarnished by distributing books to their houses. Firefighters are not to blame, says Faber. The public's preconceptions need to shift. Long before the firemen started setting fire to the books, they had already stopped reading them. According to him, all they can do now is wait for the right time to come along. The TV families will be wiped out by the impending conflict. According to Guy, they should be able to bring books back into the open again. Guy still has a pressing issue to deal with. Guy continues to pull pages out of the Bible, and Faber finally relents and agrees to help. However, he knows someone who owns a printing press and must hand it over to him. Despite Guy's agreement, he's confused about what to say to Beatty. In order to help him remember what to say, Faber recommends that he wear an earphone that he designed. Guy, on the other hand, plans to give Beatty a replacement book. When Guy returns home, he discovers his wife having a party for Mrs. Phelps and Mrs. Bowles, two of her closest friends and neighbors. Guy tries to strike up a conversation with him, but they aren't conversant enough to sustain it. Even though some of their family members are involved in the conflict, they have no opinion about it. Asked who they voted for in the previous presidential election, the women admit that they made their choice based on their impressions of the candidates' looks. Angry, Guy reaches for his poetry book, disregarding his wife and Faber's stern cautions. He begins reading them a poem by Matthew Arnold, Dover Beach. After her husband went for the war, Mrs. Phelps begins to grieve. Firemen can only carry one book home per year, and Mildred tries to reassure the women by informing them that this is so they can show their families just how worthless they are. Guy is being urged by Faber to believe Mildred's story. Assisted by Faber, he makes the decision to burn the book. While Mildred goes to sleep, Guy yells at the women and tells them to go. A man discovers that his wife has been burning his books one by one, and wonders whether the women are correct and that it's preferable to focus on the pleasures of life and ignore the truths that lie beyond the veil. Faber says he'd agree if the battle didn't seem so imminent. Tells him, "You'll never learn if you keep your ignorance hidden." In the firehouse, Guy has brought a book. Without even glancing at it, Beatty puts the item into the trash. Beatty then quotes a number of literary works in an attempt to confuse Guy and convince him that reading books is better than burning them. When an alarm goes off, everyone scrambles to get their gear. Guy is distraught when he sees that the house they've arrived at is his own. As his wife leaves the house, Guy sees her get into a taxi with her suitcase and get on the road. When he realizes she contacted the fire department, he is shocked. Guy is given a flamethrower by Beatty and told to burn down Beatty's residence. Beatty then takes Guy into custody. At this point, Beatty notices that Guy is listening to another person in the other earphone. He snatches the earpiece and says that he will track down the other person and give Guy his orders. Guy had had enough of Beatty's literary quotations. Guy kills Beatty with a flamethrower after quoting a line from Julius Caesar. Guy knocks out the other firefighters while they are frozen in place. It's only when the mechanical dog attacks that Guy is injected with anesthesia and the flamethrower is used to destroy it. Guy has to flee with a numb leg, which makes things more difficult. But first, he gathers Mildred's 4 books, which she left in a rage. He stumbles away as he hears sirens. As he listens to his normal official radio in his ears, an announcement is made by the police notifying him of their presence. Defining him and putting the general public on high alert is necessary. An automobile approaches, and he expects it to be a police car. Instead, it is a group of youths intent on running him over. Is it possible that these are the same high school students who murdered Clarice? After that, he leaves the books at the home of another firefighter and calls the police. After then, this individual returns to Faber's residence. Tells the professor what occurred and provides him money to flee. Faber advises him to follow the railroad tracks to identify intellectuals who are on the streets. To avoid alerting the search dogs, Guy gives Faber a bag full of Faber's old clothes and advises him how to get rid of any traces of his scent. While running, Guy peeks into houses he sprints past in an effort to dodge the search party. Everyone is glued to their television sets as the race progresses. To make matters worse, he leaps into the river as he arrives. He leaves the river and follows the helicopter tracks as they move in the opposite direction. A group of men on the streets is encountered by Guy. As they had been following him on their portable television, they invited him to join them. In order to avoid losing face, the guys warn him that the administration will shortly select a scapegoat. The dog attacks and kills a solitary Guy as he strolls along the street. His selection was based on the fact that he was a lone pedestrian. This is unquestionably an anti-social action. Guy Montauk has died, according to the news on the TV. Guy discovers that everyone has memorized many passages from classic literature. People have done this all around the country. Everything is ready for when humanity is ready to learn again. When Guy looks around, he's taken aback by how ordinary the men all appear. Even still, they all look like a bunch of scumbags. To which they respond, "Don't let the cover fool you." It's heartbreaking to hear that he doesn't miss his wife in the city and doesn't care if she dies, as he says he has a wife in the city. One of the men informs him that in order to be remembered, one must leave a piece of one's spirit behind in whatever one does. Planes suddenly appear above them and begin dropping bombs on the city, completely obliterating it. Suddenly, Guy and his new pals are flung to the ground. Guy ponders Mildred's death as he rests on the ground, wondering how she came to be killed. In Chicago, he finally recalls meeting Mildred. Later, the men return to the city to aid any remaining survivors there may be. People will need literature to help them reconstruct when the time comes. Build a mirror factory as their initial structure so they can all look in the mirror at once. Guy Montauk, his grandfather and his father were all firemen, but Guy is the first generation of his family to question his life. In this futuristic metropolis, firefighters don't put out fires, instead, they destroy knowledge by setting fire to books. There is something missing from his life, and it doesn't matter what it is. Anyone who questions the world attracts him, and he knows that this is the type of friendship he craves. Everyone else around him appears to be in a kind of haze. Then, one day, a young girl emerges from the fog. She inquires about the world around her. As a result of this, Guy sets off in search of solutions. She refuses to have meaningful interactions with him. When it comes to talking about her television family, she's like most other individuals. Guy, despite the fact that he misses his wife, continues to hunt for the missing piece of his life. Since his job is to burn books, he believes that they are the missing piece in the puzzle. He becomes a target of the authorities because he owns books, which are forbidden. Captain Beatty, Guy Montauk's boss at the fire department. Beatty is a complicated individual. In spite of the fact that he is portrayed as a villain, the reader is moved by his admission that he has found the world to be a lonely place and would prefer to spend his time in pursuit of pleasure. He has a wicked sense of humor and appears to be able to read Guy's mind, perhaps because he was once Guy's thoughts. His attempts to influence Guy are unsuccessful, even though Guy is an almost indestructible blank slate that he can easily manage. In spite of his dislike for reading, he frequently cites from literature. Then, when he doesn't even try to save himself, he becomes much more of a villain. Professor Faber, the professor, is an intellectual. He is a retired professor of English who still has a few books in his house. He easily confesses that he and others like him were the cowards who did not intervene to stop the book burnings when they had the opportunity to do so. When he helps Guy flee persecution, he finally takes a more active role in the resistance. Prior to meeting with another member of the resistance, he gives Guy the location of a roving band of intellectuals who hang out along the railroad lines. The Book People, a group of intellectuals that are positioned throughout the country. They have devised a method for memorizing sections of ancient literature so that they will be available to them in the Dark Ages, when they will be needed most. Guy is welcomed by their leader, Granger, who explains their way of life to him and makes him feel at home. As far as they are concerned, the Bible verses he memorized are important. As soon as the bomb went off, they rushed to aid the surviving in their hometown. It wasn't long after he was born that Ray Douglas Bradbury began to acquire a liking for stories. When he was 14, his family moved to Los Angeles, California, and his future was set. For many afternoons he spent attempting to meet celebrities in the Hollywood area. The Burns and Allen episode for which he wrote his first paycheck was when he was 14 years old. When he was barely 11 years old, he started writing. He used any paper he could get his hands on, including butcher paper, to jot down his thoughts. Bradbury was a prolific writer who wrote every day from the moment he was able to hold a pencil properly until the day he died. As much time as he could, he spent at the library, and he gave back to the libraries in return. I grew up surrounded by books. Colleges and universities don't hold any value for me. Libraries are important to me since most students lack financial resources. It was during the Great Depression that I graduated from high school, and my family had no money. Because I was unable to attend college, I spent 10 years going to the library 3 days a week. He continued, as reported by the Paris Review, by saying, "In college, you cannot learn to write. They assume they know more than you, and they aren't. This is a terrible place for writers." Author Ray Bradbury was an enthusiastic advocate of libraries and an eager reader. He took engaged in a variety of fundraising efforts aimed at keeping libraries open, particularly in the state of California. Even though he was a big fan of technology, he was opposed to the idea of his novels being made available as e-books. The publisher of Fahrenheit 451 finally agreed to make it freely available to libraries, and he finally consented. It is still the only ebook that the publisher offers to libraries for free. Edgar Allan Poe had a major influence on Bradbury's early horror stories, which he penned until he was 18. At the age of 12, inspired by Edgar Rice Burroughs, he wrote a sequel to The Warlord of Mars. He was also a talented illustrator who created his own Tarzan comics. He believes the human being is in a strange circumstance in a very odd planet, and he believes that we can triumph by acting morally, he stated, citing H.G. Wells and Jules Verne as two of his favorite science fiction writers. He married Marguerite McClure, known as Maggie, in 1947, and they were together until her death in 2003. They had a total of 4 children. He didn't have a driver's license, so he had to rely on public transportation or his bicycle. When he was 27, he married his childhood sweetheart. He was friends with a wide range of people, including writers, filmmakers, actors, and more. After Gene invited him to write for Star Trek, he and Gene Roddenberry became good friends and remained so for the next 3 decades. They stayed friends despite his refusal to date him. Also, he was a personal friend of the Addams Family creator, creating a series of short stories that were intimately tied to the show's plot. He had a stroke in 1999 and was confined to a wheelchair for the remainder of his life. Despite this, he continued to write. The New Yorker published an essay by him. 1 week before his death, he published a book about his inspiration for writing. In 2012, at the age of 91, Ray Bradbury passed away after a protracted illness. Many others, including President Obama, wrote eulogies in his honor. Stephen King, in a statement posted to his website, said, "Ray Bradbury penned 3 novels and well over 300 short stories, all of which were excellent. A Sound of Thunder, For example, was the name of one of the latter. The receding thunder of a giant's footsteps is the sound I'm hearing right now. But the books and stories are still there, with all their poignancy and peculiar beauty. Fahrenheit 451 author was what he requested to be printed on his tombstone. Thank you for listening in Audiobook Academy. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button for more content like this. See you in next video.